Well, I can project pretty good. We're good? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming out today to learn all about birds, nests, eggs, and babies. Can you turn the mic down a little bit? It's really loud in my ear. And I'm trying not to project, but it's echoing in my ear. Okay? So as we go through the program today, we're going to learn all about different birds that you can find right outside the building. Yes, even the bald eagle is close by. There are nowadays several nests in Lancaster County. At one point, someone told me there were 18, but I think that number has gone up. When I'm at the county park, I know of 5 in a less than 10-mile radius. So that tells me there's even more. And those bald eagles, well, they don't only have to live near the water. They're great flying. They don't only eat fish. They, of course, will catch other wild animals. They will eat roadkill. And they already have chicks in their nest that are just about as big as mom and dad right now, because their eggs would have hatched at the end of February and into March. And well, we're now in May. So this nest is one of the nests that is along the Conestoga River, but right along a road in someone's backyard. Yeah, I wish that was my backyard, but it's not. And they're in this beautiful sycamore tree here. The nest is located right outside of what some of us refer to as Bridgeport or Lancaster City. It's right down the road from that Weiss Shopping Center, right on Lampeter Road. Here's the adult. Here's the other adult actually feeding the baby. This was a picture taken last year. Here's a close-up of the adult and the baby. It pays to know people in Lancaster County. Someone who comes to a lot of my programs, they homeschool their kids. Her brother lives in the house right next door to the tree. So every now and then I get some great pictures that he has taken with a wonderful camera. And you can see right here, not only is that eagle calling out with its mouth open, but you can see what's down in its talons there. Yeah, that's dinner coming into the nest there. Well, I'm gonna play the sound of the bald eagle for you, because the bald eagle sound is actually one of those bird sounds that most people can't recognize. And part of it is not your fault if you can't recognize it. Part of it might be the fault of the TV shows you watch, because sometimes on the TV shows, when the bald eagle comes out, they don't play the sound of the bald eagle. Here's the sound of the bald eagle. Sounds more like a seagull. Doesn't sound like that ferocious bird that it should sound like, because on those TV shows and movies, oftentimes they'll show our beautiful, majestic bald eagle, and they will play the screeching, eerie sound of the red-tailed hawk. It sounds a little bit more ferocious than the actual sound of the bald eagle. But hey, bald eagles often live along creeks and streams and rivers. There's a better view of its dinner. You can see that nice big fish that it probably got right out of the Conestoga River. Don't worry, bald eagles do also clean up the environment. They will eat roadkill and stuff. But their nest, and if I go backwards, the nest is the biggest nest built by a bird. If you take a Volkswagen Bug, those beetle cars, turn it upside down and put it in a tree, that's the size of a bald eagle's nest. Okay? They weigh a lot also. And as the bald eagle is nesting, as the chick grows, they often add sticks to the top and create like a railing, you know, that the babies won't fall out of the nest kind of thing. Well, if you build that sturdy of a nest, you're going to use it year after year after year after year. Okay? So you put all that work into it. When you come back to the nesting site in the middle of February, you're ready to go. Unlike some of the other birds we're going to learn about today who have to build a nest every time they want to lay eggs. Another bird who lives along the rivers, the osprey. Ospreys are a little smaller than the eagles, having more of a white head but not a white tail. And don't forget, those bald eagles actually don't get their white head and white tail until they're over 3 years old. Otherwise, they're brown and speckled like a hawk. And the osprey also has what we refer to as an eye stripe, which is a really good identifying feature. Now, the ospreys, they prefer a platform to nest in, like you see here. So as humans over the years learn to help the bird population, humans will put platforms out in rivers, lakes, along the edges. And then an osprey will gather all those sticks and build a wonderful nest that it will be able to use year after year. And what I've read a long time ago about ospreys is they don't only put sticks in their nest. They are the animals who like to collect trash. Oh, they will put all kinds of toys, plastic balls. The article I read years ago talked about even dolls being in there. Well, think about all the trash that you find on the edge of a river or on the edge of the ocean, because they'll be there also. So yeah, they're the hoarders in the bird world, is what scientists often say, because they stash all that trash inside the stick pile there. They do eat more fish than anything else, and I'm looking for the sound of the osprey, because they actually sound very similar to the eagle. But a little higher of a pitch. Again, still sounding more like seagulls sound, but again, living along the water. So us humans have really helped the eagle and the osprey population, well, since we kind of hurt their population back in the 1930s. If we remember that chemical DDT, and by the mid-60s, the eagle population had crashed. So had the osprey population, because they would eat the fish who had the DDT chemicals in them, and then they couldn't lay their eggs anymore. Well, by cleaning up the environment, we've helped out the environment, and we've helped out the population of eagles and ospreys, so much so that they are no longer endangered species. They're still threatened species, because we definitely don't have as many as we used to, but as our Earth gets cleaner and cleaner, their habitat's gonna, or their numbers are gonna go up and up. Also nesting even before the eagles and the ospreys. If you look at this nest that the bird up there did not build, because owls don't build nests. They nest in January. So they take the nest that a hawk built and they claim it for years and years until it falls down. And those great horned owls in January are sitting on eggs. Well, when you're at the top of the food chain, you can nest first. By now, the juvenile owls are getting ready to leave the nest and learn how to hunt just when all the other baby animals and birds are being born, making hunting a little easier for you. These are the great horned owls. They, of course, are the ones who say, hoo, 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 hoo. Whereas this bird is the barn owl. Gets its name because, of course, it lives in barns. Clever scientists. Some would even call the barn owl monkey face. Well, another common name for the barn owl, because it has a white belly and white under its wings, and it's the only species of owl that does not hoot. No, hoo, 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 hoo. They say, so some call it ghost owl. Think about that white image flying through the sky saying, ghost owl. Well, if you have a barn owl, and these are baby barn owls, yeah, they're not so cute when they're only about a week old. They get cuter, and they'll get fluffier. If you have a barn owl living in your barn, well, you have the best rodent catcher. Okay? They will go out and control the rodent population for you. Well, in the owl world, and even in the eagle world, in the bird of prey world, see, this is a family of screech owls. And when they lay their eggs, mom lays one egg on a Monday. She waits and lays the second egg maybe on Wednesday. The third egg maybe not till Saturday. Birds of prey every year lay a different number of eggs. Some years an owl could lay 5. Some years they might only lay 3. And some years they might have 7 young. Depends how much food there is in the habitat. Whereas when we talk about the songbirds in a little bit, bluebirds always lay 5 eggs. That's the way it works for them. And songbirds lay 1 egg a day until they're all laid. And then they all hatch on the same day. In the bird of prey world, well, you can look at this family portrait, and it does a good job of showing who hatched first. And who's the smaller, scrappier one who maybe hatched 7 or 10 days later. So in an owl nest, survival of the fittest, competition with your siblings happens from day 1, and every time mom and dad bring food back to the nest. Now this is also a screech owl. So this was the adult of these little juveniles here. Screech owls, though, are one of our best owls who will live in a box. It's like a little bigger than a bluebird box with a 3-inch entrance hole. And on the edge of the woods, 12 feet up in a tree, you will attract screech owls. And the screech owl makes 2 calls. They say, and the whinny and the tremolo. The and now owls, because they're getting ready to nest in November and December, that's when they're the most vocal. But you can still hear owls every night. But you have to open those windows after the sun goes down, and that's when you might hear them. And of course, owls are silent when they're actually hunting. So, on to the bird who used to be a sign of spring. But they're here all winter long, the beautiful robin. But they have now started pairing off. Saw one this morning, actually, with a group outside sitting on her nest up in a pine tree. The robin is quite a musical bird. They are in the thrush family. They're related to bluebirds, who are also very musical. And you can see robin blue colored eggs in their nest. And the robin's nest, well, they are the best nest builder. They use mud and grass. So this one that looks like a really neat bowl, you know what came first? Us humans making bowls or the birds making their nests, you know? But the nice thing with the mud is it stays stuck in the trees. And by staying in the trees, it's not going to fall down, okay? Now, they're only going to use it once. Now, occasionally, a robin will reuse the nest, but typically, all of our songbirds build a new nest each time they lay eggs. And in one season, spring and summer of the same year, they could have 2 nestings or broods, or they can have as many as 3, depending on what our weather does later in the summer. Well, the robin, because it's a thrush, I mentioned it's related to bluebirds, but it's also related to the wood thrush. Now, the wood thrush is still a migratory bird. They leave, they go south all winter long. Robins and bluebirds don't. And I will share with you that this morning when I was out I had preschoolers and we were birding. I had them out there looking at all kinds of birds. They got to touch and feel this stuff. And it was the first wood thrush I heard. So they are now back. And the wood thrush, some call the wood thrush the flute player in the woods. Where is my wood thrush? I know I have it in here. There it is. Anyone recognize the sound of a flute? See, I couldn't tell you the difference between a flute, a clarinet, or a trombone, okay? Not my thing. But even when I first started teaching people about birds, I knew that the wood thrush sounded like a flute. Now I can hear it out in the woods and I know it immediately. But in my younger days, I would stand there and someone would say, oh, what was that bird? And I would say, oh, did it sound like a flute? Yeah, it did. Oh, that's the wood thrush. Now, I hear it first. I got better at learning the bird sounds. In a college music class, they told me I was tone deaf, so that's my excuse. But now I can recognize those sounds. And it really just takes practice of listening. The more you're out there listening to those birds, the better you get at hearing their different sounds. Some of the birds have always been good at owls and the sounds that owls make because they have a pattern. Just like I could always identify a chickadee. Well, the chickadee says its own name. Chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee. That's an easy one. It's those more musical ones that I always had a hard time with, but now I'm getting better. So the wood thrush will now be here until around September, and then they will head south for the winter. And of course, birds go south for the winter because what does the South have that we don't have in the winter? It's not warmth. Humans migrate for warmth. Food. They have caterpillars and worms and things, insects for them to eat in the wintertime. That's why robins stay. They can find food here in the wintertime. We put those bird feeders out. They adapt their diet and change, so they stay. No need to fly 2,000 miles twice. Spring and fall. Here's the one that you'll find down along creeks and streams, even over at the pond and stuff. I know I've seen them here. This is the kingfisher. And the kingfisher uses that amazing beak to go find its dinner or the fish that it's going to eat. And the kingfisher, when they make their sound, they sound kind of like a rattle of a rattlesnake. Where's my, back to my thing? While I find that, we're going to take a look at where they put their nest. Their nest is that hole right there on the stream bank. Just like a woodpecker would chisel out a hole in a tree, the kingfisher chisels out a hole in the stream bank. Now that's a good place until we get a lot of rain. Okay? So maybe that one's going to be safe from a flood. But even if it does get flooded, they will lay another set of eggs. Okay? They know if that first brood doesn't survive, they're going to lay another brood. Just keep these on. And here's our belted kingfisher. That rattling kind of sound, so it's not always a rattlesnake. When you're close to the water, it could be the belted kingfisher. Now another bird with a really long beak. This is the black-crowned night heron. And the black-crowned night heron, well, there used to be a rookery up here by Oregon Dairy 30 years ago. That's not up there anymore. Because herons, whether they're black-crowned night herons or great blue herons, they nest in what is called a rookery, a place where there are many nests in one area. That's safety in numbers. Now the herons, here's the skull of a great blue heron, designed, of course, for catching dinner, crayfish, or fish. Now I need you to know that all the wings and the feet and even the nests and skulls you see up on the table, I did not go out and hunt and kill any birds, just so I could show you the great blue heron skull, the great blue heron wing, and its feet. I found it already dead. Hit by a car, died of old age. Other people like to find dead stuff, and then they always call me. Hey, Lisa, I just found a dead great horned owl, red-tailed hawk. Do you want it? Yeah, I want it. We have a permit that allows us to collect dead things, and then I clean them up so people can touch and feel them, because you would never be this close to the skull of a great blue heron, or even the skull of the great horned owl, or even that great horned owl's talons. But today you can come up and touch and feel them. So when I collect them, I have to report all of the birds I collect that are dead, because all birds are protected by law, except for two songbirds, the house sparrow and the starling, and I'll let you know why as we get to them, or birds that you go hunting on, okay? Which means technically, legally, you're not allowed to have the feathers of a robin or a cardinal, because you can't prove you didn't kill that bird to get those feathers. That's the law. That is the Migratory Bird Treaty Act that was put in place in, I think, 1976, because, you know, people were just killing birds for their feathers. You know, all those fancy hats and all those down jackets and blankets, so we had to make the laws and protect those birds, and they are all still protected. You know, there was a time when you went to Hawk Mountain, not to watch the birds, but to kill the hawks and the owls and stuff. Luckily, the government realized shortly that if we got rid of all the birds of prey, well, we're only going to have prey left, and we'll be taken over by the mice. So you're not allowed to kill birds of prey either. All birds are protected by law. But if you were near a heron rookery, you would notice that the juveniles are very camouflaged. And that's how it is with a lot of the birds. The males are brighter and more colorful to attract the females. The females are often more dull in color because, well, they have the important job of sitting on and protecting the eggs. And the juveniles are more camouflaged also. Now, if you're ever near a heron rookery, I don't recommend walking underneath it. Now, you might hear the herons yell at you if you get close. Even if there's a heron down on the creek or the river and you get close to them, a great blue heron's going to say, ah, ah, ah. That means get away. And if you don't get away or get out from underneath their nest, they're going to poop on you. And they eat fish. Yuck. And I'm a big believer that if you get pooped on by a bird, it brings good luck. My grandmother told me that as a kid all the time. And I figured out why. Well, the day's got to get better. You've just been pooped on. It can't get much worse. You know, but I still haven't never won the lottery when I've been pooped on by a bird either. So I don't know how much luck it brings you, but it's still fun to think about. But don't walk under the heron rookery. And now as you look up here at this tree, I hope you see our largest woodpecker right here. But anyone else see the other bird? The one who walks down the tree, upside down. Right here, the little nuthatch. So here's the nuthatch, and there's the pileated woodpecker. The nuthatch is now gone on this picture, but the pileated, or you might say pileated, they have their home here where the young is. And all these holes up here are their feeding holes. That's where they get the food and all the other not so alive trees anymore. Well, here's the skull of a pileated woodpecker. Now, the end of the skull is flat, like a chisel, designed for tapping. Yeah, what came first? The pileated woodpecker beak or the human-invented chisel? I'm sure those humans watch that bird chisel out that wood. And then, of course, the woodpecker has a very long tongue. The pileated, that one doesn't have the tongue attached anymore, but this little red-bellied has the tongue attached. The tongue wraps the whole way around their head, and it's sticky. And that's what they use to get the insects out of that hole that they made. Okay? And the pileated woodpecker, like I said, they are our largest woodpecker. I'll play the sound that they make. And then when they're excavating their hole or looking for food, the drumming. All woodpeckers make that drumming sound, but our small little downy woodpecker is more like a little tap, tap, tap. Nothing like the pileated woodpecker's drumming. Our most colorful hawk. Some would call it the hover hawk. This is the male. Here's the female. Or it is the American kestrel. The neat thing about American kestrels is they love Lancaster County farmland. They love living in cavities of trees. They love living in boxes, inside barns. Well, this light is right next to the Environmental Center, right outside my office. And many years ago, every morning, the male would bring the female a gift. And it was his way of saying, I can feed you, I can feed babies. And this particular morning, I know it's there because I took the picture. It's hard to see, but there's a snake. He would hand her a garter snake every morning. It was the neatest thing to watch. And they did nest. So they nested back in 1991 inside the barn, the environmental center. Well, then we remodeled the barn. And in 1993, maybe 4, we put a box up outside. And here are the babies that lived in that box around 1997. I climbed up a ladder and took their pictures. They were about 2 weeks old. Their eyes were already open, but they reminded me of little puppies. Their talons are well developed. You know, I always joke like a lab puppy has to grow into their paws that are so big. That's how I felt about the little kestrel. And then I went back up a couple weeks later, and you can see the color has changed. This was one of the ones that lived in the barn in 1991. They were easier just to photograph because they were on a ledge. And don't worry, the ones right here, they're fine. They're just laying down. It's okay. And then I put them all back in their nest. Now, I wonder if there's anyone thinking, oh no, she touched them. Because what happens when you touch a baby bird? Most people say, well, mom doesn't come back because she smells you. That's why you're not supposed to touch baby birds. Well, I was told that as a kid all the time. And I never touched the baby ducks on the pond that was up the road from my house. But birds can't smell. And mom and dad came right back to feed and check on those babies. Actually, while I climbed the ladder both times, mom was yelling at me on the top of the roof of the barn. Yes, I did wear a helmet just in case she flew down and tried to attack me. Because that would be her right. I just wanted to check on how healthy the babies were. You know, like when we put out a bluebird box, it's important that we look inside to make sure the babies are healthy, to make sure the nest is not infested with ants or yellow jackets. Because we've put that box out there, we should take care of who's living inside it. So back the baby kestrels went, and they only came back and nested 2 or 3 more times, and now they have found somewhere else to nest. Which makes me feel good that maybe they are finding cavities in trees, or I also know that more people nowadays put out those boxes for kestrels and other birds to live in. So that helps their population. The bird who will nest down on the ground. She is right there sitting on her eggs. When she, and this is a killdeer, when she gets up, well, her eggs are quite camouflaged. They look like the rocks she is laying them on. Now, she makes an interesting sound. And the killdeer is technically a shorebird, but they like Lancaster County. They nest. This one was actually nesting outside of the environmental center one year, which was not a good place because kids walk past all the time. They only stayed there 1 year, and then they got the memo, we shouldn't nest here. But one of the interesting things about the killdeer, when the female is sitting on the nest and the male looks just like her, no color difference, if a predator comes towards the nest, the male will start calling and making that sound, and he'll flap around like he has a broken wing. Oh, he's now injured. And if I'm the fox who wants to eat the female and the eggs, I'm now going to go after the injured male. And then he just gets up and flies away, and the hope is the fox got distracted and didn't get to eat eggs for lunch. If you're a bird who nests down on the ground, as soon as you hatch, you have to be up and ready to run away. Oops. There's the little baby killdeer. They're born with their eyes open. They're born with their feathers developed. Even those baby birds of prey were born with their eyes closed and no feathers because they didn't have to run away right away. Any day now we're going to see this. Has anyone seen baby geese? I haven't yet. Geese are laid down on the ground. They need to run away also. And they grow very quickly because they are susceptible to predators at a young age. Even the mallard, the female, the male, a nest, which will often go all the way up to 12, 14 eggs in that nest. You'll lay a few extras when you lay your eggs down on the ground. And as soon as they hatch, they're off and running. You know, pay attention to WGAL because I'm sure it will be on the news when the baby ducks at Lancaster Country Day School fly into the courtyard. Well, the adults fly into the courtyard, lay the eggs. The babies can't get out, and they open up the doors to the school and let them walk through. It happens at a lot of places. If you all had a courtyard here, you all would do the same thing, I'm sure, as soon as those baby ducks, and every year it happens. So, a way for us to help those mallards who hatch and get out on their way. Well, the prettiest duck, I think, is the wood duck. This is the male wood duck, and they don't nest on the ground, so maybe they're even the smartest duck. They nest in a cavity or a box. A hollow opening in the tree is a cavity, and the thing, though, that's different with the wood ducks is when they hatch, well, now you got to jump. And you have 18 to 24 hours to jump out of that box or that cavity. If you've never seen a video of this, Google it on the internet. It is the cutest thing to watch the baby wood ducks come jumping out. And they have to do it right away. And it's funny because they will, like if there's a camera inside the nest, you'll notice one will jump and all the other ones run back away. Like, no way, look what happened to Jimmy, I'm not going down there. And one by one, they eventually all go down, and mom is down on the ground yelling. That's the sound she makes. And she will call and call and call to them until all of them hatch out. And now you can see how nice and camouflaged they are, a little bit more developed. Many babies there. By Memorial Day. Memorial Day is when there will be baby wood ducks. I always like to go paddle the Conestoga in my canoe on Memorial Day weekend just to see baby wood ducks, all following mom on the river. Well, then we have the one who likes to mimic and imitate all the other birds, the mockingbird. And if you look inside the nest of a mockingbird or any bird, baby birds have either a bright yellow mouth or bright red, bright orange in color. That's the bullseye. You know, it's dark inside that nest. Mom and dad need to know where to get the food. So baby birds have that bright color of their mouth. And then we have the blue jay. It might be colored blue, but not the eastern bluebird. This is the blue jay. If you want blue jays, all you have to do is put out peanuts in the shell, and you will have every blue jay in the neighborhood. They call all their cousins, all their siblings to come and feed. And unfortunately, a lot of people will always say to me, well, they're the mean bird. No, they're the bigger, louder bird at the bird feeder. They're not mean. They don't pick on the other birds. One thing that they do by being louder, and they often sit and perch at the tops of the trees, they actually warn the other birds that there's danger. So they're being loud to protect their family and to protect the other birds by letting them know, hey, there's an intruder. And yeah, you are the intruder that they're yelling about. Saw my first pair of Orioles today also. Of course, the male, who is very orange in color. And yes, this is a female Baltimore Oriole. So they're a migratory bird also. They've now come back. But they are also the bird who makes one of the most beautiful nests. Little hanging baskets that they put up in the tree. They will use the fiber from some plants. Whoops, you can probably tell in this one, well, they'll even use our human trash. See that blue and green stuff? It's stuff from like a tarp. There's also Easter grass I've seen in there. I like to put out yarn and string and then try and find the yarn and the string out in a nest somewhere. So also this one has a lot of fishing line. So they kind of clean up the environment. They clean up our trash that people leave behind. They like to be along the waterway. I saw my first pair of them this morning along the Conestoga River. They're also the bird that at your bird feeder, they would love if you put grape jelly out. They have a sweet tooth. They love grape jelly and orange, half of an orange. And they will go and they will pick the orange pulp out of the orange and drink the juice that's there. So they're not looking for your sunflower seeds because they're really insect eaters, but they have a sweet tooth. And then we have the world's worst nest builder, the doves. The mourning doves, they'll take 2 sticks, put them in the tree, lay an egg, and the egg falls down. Then they'll put 4 sticks in the tree, lay an egg, and the egg falls down. Don't worry, they're not a threatened species. They eventually figure it out. We have plenty of mourning doves. And you can really hear them flying because you can really hear them when they take off from the ground. They are ground feeders. They eat the seed that the other birds knock out of the bird feeder when it's down on the ground. Okay? And like I said, they're now nesting also, but you always find a few cracked eggs early in the spring, and you know if they're all white in color, they came from the mourning doves. My favorite. I have to say, this past Monday was when the male returned to my yard, and friends of mine have had them for a week or 2. So I was just waiting and waiting, and then so the males return first, and then the females return. Well, I also have a female now in my yard at the feeders. I put out many hummingbird feeders for them. You know, they just took that long journey all the way to South America, 500-mile trip across the Gulf of Mexico, nonstop, no food. And they do return to the same area. So I know that the ones that are in my yard are the ones that were there last year, or I like to think so. But I do know that they return to the same area because we may have slacked off a little bit a couple years ago at the environmental center, and we didn't have the hummingbird feeder out. And one morning I showed up to work. There's the male hummingbird sitting on the branch where the feeder was. He looked at me and said, 1,500 miles, where's my sugar water? I went inside, I got out, quarter cup of sugar and a cup of water, and I filled up the feeder and hung it, and he was happy. Okay? So they do come back to the same place. And they are the mightiest little birds who make the cutest little nest. Their nest is the size of a half a walnut. And it's made out of spider webs. And it's covered in lichens. And she will only ever lay 2 eggs. That's all that fits in there. And the nest, kind of as she uses it, will stretch, because those 2 will get a little bigger. The size of the egg she lays, of course, is the smallest bird egg. It's the size of a jelly-belly jelly bean. Teeny, tiny little egg. And then we have the grackle, one of our more noisy, not so nice sounding birds, with the pretty iridescent purple and the very fanned tail that they have, a distinguishing feature. And I love this picture because look at those big red mouths just waiting for food. Sometimes the grackles will nest with their friends in a pine tree. So you might end up with 2 or 3 families of grackles up there. Their nest is a lot like the robin, lots of mud, but a bigger nest, bigger bird. They make a bigger nest. You can see there's 5 babies in that nest. And the pretty bird. And the cardinal, even when it sings, says, pretty, 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 pretty. That's their call and sound. Of course, the male, good example of the male being more colorful than the female. They like to go right to where all the branches on a tree come together. So now that tree and the tree's actual main branches are really supporting their nest of sticks, which is why they're also like shrubs, because shrubs have lots of branches that come together in a Y kind of, and that's where they will most often nest. And they always put leaves in their nest. That's great camouflage. Kind of cover up your nest with the leaves from the tree, and you will be really sheltered in there. The goldfinches. Of course, the brighter colored one is the male. In the wintertime, people often ask me, where'd the goldfinches go? Well, they don't go anywhere. They just get duller. They're not as bright and colorful. And the goldfinch, they wait a little longer to nest. So right now, they're out there gathering the fluff from the dandelions, gathering the fluff from old cattails. Their nest is a ball of like cotton. It's all fluffy. Hey, that's what makes them happy. And they also eat the seeds from those dandelions and then use the fluff. They'll use the thistle fluff inside their nest. So the goldfinches, nice, soft, comfortable nest. Ah, the bluebirds. Have any of you noticed bluebirds on the bluebird boxes? Because I know you all now have a great collection of bluebird boxes out there. So whether you've seen the bluebird, you may have heard. Now I'll come back to the bluebird, because the bluebird's not the only bird who wants to nest in the bluebird box. The dreaded, non-native, invasive, yucky-sounding house sparrow. Dirty bird, so dirty the male has to wear a bib. So the house sparrow was brought here from Europe. And it was brought here because somebody thought New York City needs birds. Same reason they brought the European starling. These are the two birds that unfortunately are given credit for the decline in the bluebird population. They kill our native birds. They don't need to nest in a cavity, a bluebird box. House sparrows can nest anywhere, so can starlings, but they are mean and destructive and they kill the birds that are already living in that box, which is why they are the only two birds, starlings and house sparrows, that are not protected by the Songbird Treaty Act, okay? And they will still try and get in bluebird boxes. They are, like I said, dirty birds. They will build a nest of all kinds of trash and every type of grass and leaf. I have found gum wrappers, cigarette butts, gross stuff inside a house sparrow nest. They will fill that box up full of trash and then lay their eggs. I'm not a fan of the house sparrow, okay? I try to get rid of them out of the boxes, but it's hard to constantly remove their nest, okay? Eventually, they get the idea, okay, I'll go somewhere else. Now, the other birds that want to live in your bluebird box, they get to stay, like tree swallows. Tree swallows are great native birds. They have pointed wings, and as they fly, they're the ones eating the bugs out of the sky. They're related to barn swallows. But of course, tree swallows live in trees. Barn swallows live in barns. And barn swallows build their nest with mud. Tree swallows are going to use grass and feathers. So if you peek in one of those bluebird boxes and you see this dome of feathers, well, you better watch out. Tree swallows are the bird who, if you get close to their box, they dive bomb you. I have not been hit yet, but they come pretty close to you. Hey, they can. They're great at flying. When you watch them fly and catch those bugs, they're just zipping around, which is why they can zip down towards your head and turn away without hitting you, okay? But if you peek inside, they lay totally white eggs. Now, because they're songbirds, Mom laid one egg a day until all 5 eggs were laid, and then those eggs all hatched on the same day, within about an hour or 2 of each other. That way, all the baby songbirds are the same size inside that nest. They all get the same amount of food. And then in the fall of the year, you'll see those swallows all gather to head south. They're one of our earlier birds to come back here from migration, so I always get excited when I see them perched on top of the bluebird box. So if you want more than just bluebirds, you put out a few extra boxes so that you can get some tree swallows. And then we have this one, who may get inside a bluebird box. Notice the different egg. This is the brown-headed cowbird. This is the bird who does not build its own nest. This is the bird who lays its egg in another bird's nest. See, these are all baby bluebirds and one cowbird. And historically, this is what those birds do. They are not killing the native bird population. The cowbird itself is native. It's supposed to be here. But historically, they followed herds of animals, wild animals. So they didn't have the time to sit on eggs for 2 weeks, to feed the babies for about 2 weeks to 16 days. So they developed, well, I'll just lay my egg in a cardinal's nest, and the cardinal will take care of them, and then they'll fledge, and they didn't have to do anything. And that, like I said, when I found this nest with the egg in it, I couldn't remove that egg. It's protected. So I let it go. And I found one also. This was a bluebird nest one year. This is a chickadee nest where I found the cowbird egg. So if you look closely, here's the baby chickadees. Here's the cowbird. Who gets more food? Yeah. So sometimes if the male and female bird feeding the babies isn't careful, they might feed the cowbird a little more than their own babies. This one though, because it was chickadees, I watched that nest every couple of days. I went to make sure that those baby chickadees were getting enough food. And the baby, or the mom and dad chickadee, did a great job. They all fledged. All baby chickadees and the cowbird fledged. And so they were all taken care of. But a chickadee nest is, well, that's kind of one I'd want to sleep in. All moss. And then they add fur from other animals. Look at a nice cozy place. This was a chickadee nest that didn't have a cowbird in it. You can see all those happy baby chickadees. They almost always have 7 eggs. Okay? The tufted titmouse, the one who visits our bird feeder, who's always calling for their friend Peter. They say, Peter, 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 Peter. That's the tufted titmouse, who will also nest inside your bluebird box. You can tell that these are tufted titmice because they have that crest of feathers on the top of their head, even as babies. And then we have the house wren, also known as the Jenny wren. She's the chitter-chattery little bird. I always say she's saying, get away, get away, get away from my box. Because to me, that's what it sounds like. And you'll hear her yell and scream when you get close to the box that she's nesting in, because she's a cavity nester. But she will take the box and she will fill it with sticks all the way to the top and then some. But the neat thing is she puts a little hollow tube in that nest of sticks so that her babies are way down at the bottom. She also almost always lays 7 eggs. They are white and speckled maroon in color. But she will also put sticks in multiple boxes, but only nest in one. She just wants to make sure she has one that's the best, I guess. But they're fun to watch because they're a small little bird, not to be confused with the Carolina wren. So the Carolina wren is here year-round. You can see the Carolina wren has an eye stripe, but they both have this classic wren tail that sticks up in the air when they're just perching. And the Carolina wren, well, they sing and sing and sing year-round. I love them in my yard. Just another one of their sounds that they make. Because every bird, of course, makes multiple different sounds. And the Carolina wren, they are noisy, but I love watching them. One year they decided to nest in my screened-in porch. Before it had a door on it. It now has a door, but that was fine. They nested up there. I got to watch them. They love to nest in gourds. So I have several gourds around my property where chickadees will nest, and so will the Carolina wrens. But they're the ones who will nest anywhere. Here's where they're nesting in a pot that could have had a plant in it. They like to nest in hanging flower baskets. A wreath on your front door. Oh, they're the classic ones who nest there. I leave my Christmas wreath on my front door year-round. Yeah, the green pines are now brown. It's okay, I don't care. And the bird doesn't care. I leave it there, hoping that they'll nest there. I never go in and out the front door, but they never choose to nest there, which is also fine with me because they nest in the backyard where I hang out and I get to watch them. So Carolina wrens, birds again. And the bluebirds, they will use one material to build their nest. Oftentimes all pine needles or all grass. Here was one day where I knocked on the box, because I always knock on the box before I open it, because then she will leave. Well, this day she decided to stay. And then when I opened up the box on the side, of course, I was quick enough to grab her picture, and then she flew over my shoulder and pooped. So it was one of those good days. Sometimes inside your bluebird boxes, though, be careful, you might get something that's furry and not feathery. See the mouse in the house? Which is one good reason to always monitor the boxes. This happens more often in the wintertime, so it's always a good idea to clean out those bluebird boxes before March gets here so that they are ready for the birds to get ready to lay their eggs. Just like the robin's eggs, but a little smaller, that beautiful light blue color. And bluebirds are true insect eaters. Now in the winter, they'll eat berries and they'll eat suet. But I feed mine mealworms in my yard, and they love those dried and fresh mealworms, especially when they have their babies. Now it only takes baby songbirds about 16 days to grow up. Here's ones, these are newer pictures that I took in the last couple of years. As soon as you open that box and their mouth opens, you know they're hungry. But there's often days I'll peek inside the box and, well, nobody's opening their mouth because you know they've been well fed. And now you can see at around 10 days old, their feathers start growing. Here they are at around 13 days old. And by 16 days old, they're speckled little birds. And it's around 16 days old that mom and dad say, come on, it's time to leave the nest. But baby birds don't always want to leave the nest. Doesn't matter what kind of bird you are. You've been in that nest for 16 days. Mom and dad have brought you food. It's a good place to be. So how does mom and dad get them out of the nest? It's not like using a soccer ball and drop kicking it, because that's what people often say. They don't kick them out or shove them out. They just stop feeding them. I love watching my bluebirds in my yard. They will take food into the box and bring food out of the box. That's bribery. Let me dangle this chocolate chip over in a mealworm, and then the babies will eventually leave the nest. And at that point, so those of you who monitor and pay attention to the bluebird boxes here at Landis Homes, once the babies leave, you now have to remove the old nest, because mom and dad want to come back and build a new nest. You now have the 5 babies from the first nest and the 5 babies from the second nest, and mom and dad all in the area. And it's fun to watch them all as the numbers go up in the summertime. So as all of our birds are reproducing now, it's fun to pay attention. And it's still time to put out bird feeders. We don't only have to feed the birds in the wintertime. Feeding them during nesting season helps them have a guaranteed food source. And enjoy watching and listening to the birds. Does anybody have any questions?
This is just my theory. I feed bluebirds mealworms, dried. So how the little bird gets liquid from the bowls of stuffing. So I put water in the bottom of my bluebird feeder and put dry mealworms in there so they soak up.
Yeah, and they still eat them.
Yeah. Is that a good idea?
I let the rain do that on my bluebird feeder, because I have 2 bluebird feeders. Okay, I have 3. I have a little disc, little saucer hanging thing, and that's the one that fills up with rain. And then I have this actual mealworm metal feeder that has holes and stuff that they eat out of. That one doesn't get any water in it. And then I have another one that is just the bottom of a milk jug that I put holes in it. But I also feed them fresh mealworms, live ones. I raise them. But you can get them at the fish place, live mealworms. You can leave them in your refrigerator and then feed them. You can get like 100 of them or 1,000 of them mailed right to your house.
What do you feed them?
Everything eats them. Bluebirds eat them. The wrens.
Feed the mealworms.
Oh, oatmeal. But if you leave them in the refrigerator, you don't have to feed your mealworms. They don't need to meet. They go into a dormant stage. See, the mealworm becomes a beetle called the darkling beetle. But you don't want the beetles, you want just the mealworms, so you leave them in the refrigerator. I want the beetles because I want the beetles to lay more eggs so I have more mealworms. I haven't bought mealworms in 10 years.
So what do you feed the beetles?
Oatmeal,
Oatmeal.
toilet paper tubes. Yep. We can talk while I clean up.
You're in trouble.
So hey, I know another family where the wife told him he had to get his own refrigerator for his mealworms. It's all right, you can do that. We can talk.